And look at that. Oh, it's upside down. What's up, boys and girls? Welcome back to Redwood RC. We are back on the bench today with the Deadbolt, and I have a number of big upgrades planned for this. After doing a lot of testing with this truck, I've figured out there's a lot of things that it desperately needs. It's got some approach angle issues, it's got some slow crawling ability issues, it's got some steering issues, it's got a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be addressed, and over the next few episodes, I think we're gonna address that. One of the things I wanna try to stick to with this truck is making as many of my own parts as possible. So you saw that we already made the set of heavy bronze links. That was my first set of links that I've ever made. They didn't come out quite right. So in the future, we will definitely be rebuilding those and making them a little bit different, making some changes to the design overall. But that'll be, I think, maybe 1 or 2 episodes down the road. For now, what I want to start with is a part that I think this truck could really use, and that is front and rear bumper mounts. The truck is rigid in the center with that aluminum Endura skid plate, so that holds everything together in the center relatively tightly. But out at the ends of the frame rail, there is a lot of flex and a lot of squish and give, and I'm not a big fan of that. They are also starting to lose the threading in those plastic holes a little bit from coming in and out a couple of times. That plastic is not very durable, it's very soft, and if you cut wrong threads in there with that screw a couple of times, it's pretty much toast. So what we're gonna do is replace them with these DIY, handmade, all machined billet aluminum bumper mounts that I made myself up at the shop a couple of days ago. These are milled out of a solid block of aluminum. They are my kind of first attempt at making a part like this for this truck, and I think they went relatively well. I'm pretty happy with the result. I may end up making a couple of changes with some testing, but I think these are gonna do just fine. These are gonna add a lot of strength, a lot of rigidity, and not very much weight above the chassis, which is great. So with that in mind, let's go back in time a couple of days. Let's head up to the shop and I'll show you how I put these together. Alright, we're gonna do a bit of a voiceover here as the shop that I work in is pretty loud and noisy, so rather than scream over the machinery, let's just record this later, shall we? So you can see I've gone ahead and faced off one side of the block to get it nice and flat. I'll flip it over, and then we can go ahead and start taking bit by bit off to get to our final dimension. You can see here I'm checking my height with my digital caliper. The machine that I'm using does not have a digital readout for the Z-axis, so I am sort of having to guess my way into the final measurement. Now that we've got our block to the correct width, we're gonna go ahead and get our height, so I'll go ahead and do the same process. We're gonna face off one side, get it nice and flat, then we'll flip it over, and then come in and remove material until we have the exact height that we're looking for. You can see again, checking my measurements with the digital caliper, trying to feel my way into that perfect height, in which case this is about 11 millimeters. And we'll go ahead and repeat the process for the front bumper mount, and since we have our height already, it'll be much quicker this time. Now we can go ahead and face off one end of the block. That'll give us a nice square face to work with. Then we'll go ahead and flip it over, touch off, come over the width of this 1/2-inch end mill. And then we can go ahead and cut our final width on the block here. Repeat the process for the front bumper mount. Again, touching off there, come over the width of our mill, and then we can cut the final dimension. Now we have a perfectly square, perfectly sized block. We can go ahead and start our drilling operations. Here you can see we're marking the center of our first set of holes. These holes will become the bumper post mount holes. These are the two large holes where the bumper posts will slide into. Now that we have those holes drilled, we can go ahead and mark and drill the location of the bumper securing pin screw things, those little half pin, half screws that hold the bumpers into the bumper mount. Repeat the process for the rear bumper mount in the same locations. And since we have a nice square flat block, we can go ahead and just set it in the vise on its side and then mark and drill the location of the mount holes themselves. These are the two screw holes that go into the side of the frame rail that will secure the bumper mount bracket itself to the frame. The factory mounts only use one set of screws. We're going to take advantage of both the holes that are available and go ahead and drill and tap two sets of holes. That way we're extra strong and extra secure. This will also add a little bit of rigidity to the frame. Now that we've got our holes drilled, we can go ahead and start cutting our slots so that the mount will slide into the frame. Now in this case, I wanted to have a nice sharp radius on the inside corner of this cut, so I did have to use a 1/8 inch end mill. So we'll go ahead and touch off, find our 0 point, and then go ahead and make a series of small light cuts until we get to our final dimension. And repeat the process on the other side. For the front bumper mount, the process is much simpler. Since the cut does go all the way across the block, we'll go ahead and just grab our 1/2 inch end mill and just slice it right on in there. Flip it over for the other side and we are good to go. Next, we'll use that same 1/2 inch end mill and we'll go ahead and start roughing out the center section of these bumper mounts. I wanted to take out as much material as possible. Try to keep these things as lightweight as possible. So we're going to go ahead and rough out as much of this as we can with this big 1/2 inch end mill since it's a little bit more efficient. Repeat the process on the rear bumper mount. This one is going to require a lot more material to be removed, so we'll go ahead and take a few big cuts here. Next, we'll come in with a 1/4 inch end mill. Due to this being a metric part and the way the dimensions are laid out, I only have SAE milling equipment, so I went ahead and set this up to use a 1/4 inch end mill. It's just kind of weird, that's the way we had to do it. With that done, we can go ahead and cut our final dimension on the inside of this part. We'll flip it over, lay it in the vise, cut this inner dimension. That way we have these nice radius corners. Then we'll use that same 1/4 inch end mill to come in and cut the sides of our rear bumper mount bracket so that it will actually slot in between the frame rails. Now we can go ahead and take our 1/4 inch ball end mill and go ahead and cut the slot, the final dimension for the slot in the front bumper mount. That'll give us a nice radius inside corner and a nice clean edge all the way across. With that done, we can start our final milling operations. These are going to be mostly aesthetic, but also serve some purpose. We're going to do a series of lightning cuts across the top as well as the front and back of these, just to give it a little bit of a stylistic touch, but also to shave a little bit more weight off, because why not? And I wanted to show you the rest of this operation, but my camera does die right about here. All right, we're back, and now that you got to see a bit of the process of how I put these together, we can finally take a closer look at the finished product. I'm super happy with these. These came out almost exactly to the plans. That's kind of how everything goes though, isn't it? These are solid billet aluminum. And being that these are basically the first attempt that I've had at these, and that I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with the body situation on this yet, I pretty much went for exact copies dimensionally of the factory units. I did shorten this one a bit, and I'll show you why in a second here when we get into the installation. But other than that, they are essentially the same as what comes on the truck, just in aluminum. We did do a little bit of lightening. I wanted to try to keep these as light as possible so that we don't add any weight high up on the chassis. And I think I'm pretty happy with how they came out for a first attempt. Not too bad. So why don't we go ahead and strip this thing down? We can get the old pieces off and compare them to the new, get them installed, see how they fit, and move on from there. For the sake of the video, I've gone ahead and pulled the wheels and tires off already just to make things a little bit easier. Let's go ahead and get the body off. If you find that your body doesn't fit quite right and you're not real happy with it, you can get these little rubber neoprene washers from Home Depot for very cheap, 99 cents or so. I forget exactly how much, and they will fill that gap between your body clip and the body post and prevent that rattling and that noise. I really like them. All right, now we can see what we're dealing with a little bit better. You can see the truck is still basically stock. I haven't really done much to it yet. We have the Injora brass hubs. We also have the front and rear diff cover to add a little bit of weight down low. I made my own custom bronze links with the Axial Capra 1.9 rod ends. Now, when I made these, I didn't realize that they didn't quite come with enough. You will have to acquire 2 more rod ends if you're gonna use that set, and the ones I got unfortunately don't match. So I think we're gonna replace all of this relatively soon. I'm not super happy with the design. You can see they were just a little bit short, so I had to add some little spacers here and there to get the right length and place the axle where I wanted. But overall, I'm actually very, very happy with this truck. This thing performs really well, but we are starting to get some wear on these front and rear bumper mounts. So let's go ahead and strip the old ones off. We'll start with the rear because I think that's going to be the easiest. All right, there's the factory rear bumper mount pulled off nice and easy. And my replacement. You can see dimensionally, almost exactly the same. I did add the ability to mount a rear bumper to this one. The factory deadbolt rear bumper thing is sort of a bumper taillight mount all-in-one kind of unit and does not provide you the ability to mount a bumper to it. So if you do want to add a bumper, you got to replace this anyway. So I've gone ahead and added the exact same setup from the front bumper to the rear here so that we can add a rear bumper at some point if I want to. It does protrude the same amount because the way the deadbolt body sits on this, it sits a little bit back on the frame, actually hangs off the back of the frame, and the front of it ends before the front of the frame. Kind of weird, I'm not a big fan of it. Maybe we'll change that in the future, but that requires a little bit more modification. For now, I've just gone ahead and duplicated the factory dimensions essentially. So let's see if it fits. This is my first test fitting. Oh man, like a glove. Just slides right in. Look at that. Oh, it's upside down. Oh, look. Look at that. Like a glove. That's awesome. Oh man, I'm really happy with that. That looks great. I did end up leaving a little extra material here that I probably could have machined away. That would have taken a little bit longer to do, and it doesn't really bother me that much. So we're just gonna leave that in place for now. If I wanna make some changes to it in the future, we can. It looks like I could probably do with rounding off this edge a little bit to match the frame. Take a look at that in the future as well. Okay, before we get this thing fully mounted, let's bust out the old scale and see what the difference in weight is here, because I know we are going to be adding some weight, but I don't want to add too much weight above the lowest point of the chassis. So let's see here, the factory bumper mount, well, bumper thing, tail light holder, comes in at 7.3 grams. So super light plastic, obviously. Not very strong, very flexible, bendy, not a big fan. New custom aluminum job comes in at 30 grams exactly, so definitely a lot heavier. We added, what, 23 grams about? Not a big deal, but it is definitely added weight, and it's also weight in the rear, so you gotta make trade-offs here and there. I did have to pirate a little extra hardware from my collection because the deadbolt only comes with one screw on each side in the bumper mount, but they do provide 2 holes, and my new bumper mount takes use of those holes by adding another set of screws. So we're gonna have a lot more durability, a lot more strength, as long as it'll thread in there. Okay, so this rear set of holes on the frame here is a little bit smaller than the front set, so we're just gonna go ahead and drill that out just a bit. Okay, now that that's taken care of, let's get this guy mounted up here. And the other side. All right, now that I could not be happier with. It fits like a glove. That is absolutely perfect. I'm pumped. Everything lines up just right. Fits perfectly between the frame rails, and definitely added a lot of rigidity here. Before, when you would grab the top of these shock towers here, the whole frame would bend. You could see the whole frame bending in on itself. Now, none of that, so excellent. Definitely a step in the right direction. I'm really excited about that. It's gonna add a lot of rigidity and strength to this truck in the long run. Next step, let's go ahead and get our front bumper off so that we can get at the bumper mount itself. Front bumper off, let's go ahead and take the factory mount off. Okay. Now, this is one area where I did decide to make some changes from the factory mount to the new aluminum mount. So this factory mount, you can see, ends in front of the frame rail already. Then it kicks out a little bit to where the bumper mounts to. So you do have, I don't know, 3 or 4 millimeters of added length in front of the frame rail that isn't really necessary. So what I've gone ahead and done is shorten that so that it ends right at the front of the frame rail. And I've done that to help increase our approach angle. This truck has a serious problem with approach angle. It likes to get hung up on this front bumper a lot, and I've already tucked it back in as far as I can. You can see I've gone ahead and cut out the underside here as well as the inner supports, moved it forward as far as possible and made my own mount holes there. I also had to trim off the rear of the mount posts for that. And that's tucked it in as far as it can go on the factory mount. But the factory mount did stick out a little bit from the front of the frame. So I wanted to tuck that bumper in even more so that we can increase our approach angle and make this truck perform a little bit better. So let's go ahead and break the scale out again and see how much more weight we're gonna add to the truck here. So the factory plastic bumper mount, front bumper mount, 6.3 grams. So about the same as the rear one, a little bit lighter because it is a little bit smaller. And the custom aluminum bumper mount, 20.5 grams exactly. So again, added a significant amount of weight, but I think it's gonna be worth it overall in the long run, especially as we use this truck more and more in the future. Those plastic bumper mounts, the threads in the side here, as well as in the underside where the bumper actually secures to the truck, are gonna wear out and they're gonna get broken. So we might as well replace them with something better in the first place. We are gonna have to drill out those holes again. So let's get the drill here. Okay, now that we've got that drilled out, that will allow us to run the same size hardware in both front and rear holes, adding a tremendous amount of strength. The front bumper is where this truck is gonna take most of its impacts. So we definitely wanna make that as strong as possible. Looks like we're a little tight on the front end of the frame here. I may have to loosen this battery tray mount a little bit to get this in place, and I think I am gonna have to do that. See how that helps. Yeah, perfect. We were just a little bit tight. That's okay. I'm not perfect. Okay, now this is an issue that I thought I might run into. The rear end of this mounting area is interfering with the frame here, so I am gonna have to take a file or something and take that down a little bit so that these will fit into the frame. So why don't we take care of that? We'll jump right back with you. All right, and we're back. After some quick work with the file, I went ahead and took these corners down, nothing too difficult. Aluminum is very soft, so let's go ahead and see if we can get it fit in there now. And that is perfect, just like a glove. Go ahead and get our hardware installed. And that is amazing. I am so happy with the fit and the finish of these parts. These came out fantastic. Oh man. Definitely a huge improvement over the factory items. A ton of strength. I mean, I can feel how much more rigid this chassis is, how little flex there is in it. That's awesome. That's exactly what I wanted. Now, you can see I've gone ahead and shortened the front of this so it's flush with the frame, so that when we reinstall our bumper, let's make sure the bumper fits. Should.
One eternity later.
Okay, so it seems that I'm not as good at measuring things as I thought I was. These holes for the front and rear bumper mounts are almost exactly the same size as the bumper mount post itself, which makes it basically impossible to get that in there. Now, I thought I had given it enough clearance so that the bumper would fit in there real nice, but I guess somewhere I messed up in my math or something. So what we're gonna do is make some very quick and dirty modifications to this. Got the old drill here. All right, I know that may have been a little painful to watch for some of you, but I wanna get this thing back together. Let's see if it fits now. Look at that, like a glove. No problem whatsoever. Now, what I'm gonna have to do, you can see here where the bumper is gonna sink back a little bit more into the frame, give us just that little bit more approach angle so that this thing hopefully won't get hung up on this bumper so much. We are gonna be replacing this bumper very soon, but for now it is what we've got, so let's make it better. All right, it should fit up nicely now. Let's see. Oh man, like a glove. Like a glove, I love it. Okay, that's a good sign. Our hardware at least fits. And let's go ahead, See if we can reinstall the bumper. A little bit difficult to get that pin through the gnarled up plastic bumper itself. What's going on here? No problem. Get in there. Come on now. All right, it's in there. Finally attached. And that bumper is sucked in officially as far as it can possibly go. And that's gonna increase our approach angle as much as I think we can. Let's go ahead and reattach the body, see how it sits now. You can see not a huge difference, but it is definitely moved in much closer to the front of the body. Doesn't stick out so far like an ugly little chin. And I am absolutely stoked with these modifications, upgrades so far. These bumper mounts have been absolutely awesome. All right, everyone, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Next time you see this truck, we will be doing plenty more upgrades to it. I've got plans for electronic upgrades, servo, motor. We got transmission upgrades. I want to replace more of this plastic with more aluminum, more metal. Hopefully we can kit this thing out to be a little bit more scale as well. We're going to redo these links. We're going to rebuild the complete link set front to rear, reposition these axles, stretch the wheelbase out a little bit so that we can get some better approach and departure angles. We've got power upgrades. Everything on this truck is going to get upgraded in some way, shape, or form. So make sure you stick around, make sure you're subscribed, comment below, let me know what you want me to do to this truck, how you think it should be built. What do you think the best upgrades for an Axial SCX10II Deadbolt are, in your opinion? And where do you want to see it go from here? I know I've got some big plans for it, and I hope you're going to come along with me for the journey. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.